The emergency alert pierced through the bridge of the EDF Stalwart, its shrill tone matching the racing of Captain Sarah Chen's heart. The holographic display before her showed the Meridian Colony's distress beacon pulsing an angry red against the backdrop of the planet's azure atmosphere. Multiple hostile signatures detected, Lieutenant Park reported from Tactical, his fingers dancing across the controls. They're targeting civilian sectors. Sarah leaned forward in her command chair, studying the tactical overlay. The Razak, an aggressive species humanity had encountered just months ago, had launched a surprise attack on the outlying colony. Their crystalline ships glinted like deadly jewels as they systematically destroyed the colony's defensive grid. Orders from Command, Captain. Communications Officer Rivera announced, her voice tight. We're to maintain position and await reinforcements. Priority is protecting the Quantum Gate facility. Sarah's jaw clenched. The Quantum Gate was vital infrastructure, yes, but there were 50,000 civilians in those colonies. Time until reinforcements arrive. 4 hours minimum, Mom. A distant explosion lit up the viewport as another defense tower fell. Sarah could see escape pods launching from the surface, desperate civilians trying to flee. The Razak ships were picking them off one by one. The colony's shields are failing, Park reported. They won't last another hour. Sarah stood, her decision made. Plot an intercept course. We're going in. Rivera looked up sharply. Captain, our orders. I know our orders, Lieutenant. Sarah's voice was steel. I also know there are children down there. Families. She turned to address her bridge crew. Command wants us to protect a gate, but I didn't join the Earth Defense Force to watch civilians die when I could prevent it. She could see the conflict in their faces, the struggle between duty and conscience. Then Park straightened at his station. Intercept course plotted, Captain. Weapons hot, the tactical officer reported, determination replacing uncertainty. All hands, battle stations, Sarah ordered. We're about to ruin the Razak's day. The Stalwart dove into the fray, its particle beams lashing out at the nearest Razak vessel. The enemy ship, caught off guard by the unexpected intervention, took heavy damage before it could react. Sarah coordinated with the colony's remaining defenses, creating a corridor for civilian ships to escape through. Multiple hits on decks 4 through 7. Damage control reported as enemy fire raked their shields. Hull breaches contained. Keep those civilian ships covered. Sarah ordered. How many have we gotten out? 27 transports so far, Captain. About 8,000 civilians. The bridge rocked as another volley struck home. Shields at 40%. Sarah gripped her chair as the ship executed evasive maneuvers. Status of the colony. Last defensive grid is down, Park reported grimly. But we've got most of the civilians evacuated. Maybe 5,000 still planetside. A new alert blared, and Rivera's face went pale. Captain, 3 Razak dreadnoughts just emerged from FTL. They're moving to cut off our escape route. Sarah studied the tactical display, mind racing. The Stalwart was already damaged, and they couldn't hope to stand against dreadnoughts. But if they retreated now, those remaining civilians were as good as dead. Engineering. How much power can you give me? We're running hot already, Captain. Chief Adams replied. Push any harder, and we risk a core breach. Can we take one more pass at the colony? A pause. Maybe. But it'll burn out half our systems. We'd be limping home. Sarah nodded. Better limping than leaving people to die. All hands, brace for maximum acceleration. We're going back in. The Stalwart screamed as Sarah pushed it beyond its limits, diving between the dreadnoughts before they could bring their main guns to bear. The smaller Razak ships scattered as Sarah led them on a deadly chase, drawing their fire away from the civilian transports still rising from the surface. Last transport away, Park reported, relief evident in his voice. Then his console erupted in warnings. Multiple missile locks. They're launching everything they have. Evasive pattern Delta, Sarah ordered. Get us clear of the civilians. The ship bucked and twisted, avoiding what it could and taking hits from what it couldn't. Warning klaxons blared as systems failed across the board. But they'd done it. The civilians were clear. "Captain," Rivera's voice cut through the chaos. "Priority message from command. Admiral Drake demands we return to our assigned position immediately or face charges of gross insubordination." Sarah watched the last civilian transport jump to safety. "Send our flight recorder data and inform the Admiral that I'll gladly face whatever charges he deems appropriate. After we've saved everyone we can." Hours later, as the stalwart limped back to Earth space with severe battle damage and nearly depleted systems, Sarah knew her career was over. The charges would come swiftly: disobeying direct orders, endangering critical infrastructure, reckless endangerment of her crew. But as she read through the preliminary casualty reports from Meridian Colony, she couldn't bring herself to regret her choice. 47,000 civilians evacuated. 47,000 lives saved because she'd chosen conscience over orders. Let them strip her rank. Let them brand her a traitor. Some prices were worth paying. She didn't expect her crew to share her fate. Yet as she prepared to face the inquiry board, her senior staff remained steadfastly by her side. When she tried to convince them to distance themselves, Park had simply smiled. "With respect, Captain," he'd said, "we all knew what we were choosing when we followed your orders. Some things matter more than regulations." As the stalwart docked at Earth Station 1, Sarah Chen stood straight and proud on her bridge. She had sworn an oath to protect humanity. Today, she had lived up to that oath in the only way that mattered. They could take her command, but they couldn't take that. The refugee ship Horizon drifted silently through the outer rim, its hull marked with the scars of a hasty departure. In what had once been the cargo hold, now converted into makeshift living quarters, Sarah Chen studied the datapad containing the latest intelligence from her network of contacts. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Meridian Colony. 3 months since she and her loyal crew had been branded traitors for choosing to save civilian lives. The military tribunal had been swift and merciless. Dishonorable discharge for the entire command crew of the Stalwart. But that was just the beginning. As Sarah had begun gathering evidence to appeal the decision, she'd uncovered disturbing patterns. Other colonies had been attacked in similar ways, always with EDF ships mysteriously delayed or ordered to protect infrastructure instead of civilians. "Captain," Lieutenant Park's voice drew her attention. She told them to stop calling her that, but old habits died hard. "We've got movement on long-range sensors." Sarah followed him to the makeshift bridge they'd cobbled together. The sensor display showed 3 ships approaching their position. Razak designs, but not military vessels. Their energy signatures matched known refugee ships. "They're hailing us," Rivera reported from her station, jury-rigged from salvaged components. Sarah nodded. "Put them through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a familiar crystalline face. Ambassador Ktar, one of the few Razak who had spoken out against their species' aggressive expansion. "Captain Chen," the ambassador's translated voice carried notes of both relief and concern. "We had hoped to find you." "Ambassador, I'm surprised you're still alive, given recent events." "As are many of us." Ktar's faceted eyes shifted, a sign of distress in his species. The military coup was thorough. Those of us who advocated for peace were forced to flee. Sarah leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." "The attack on your Meridian colony was not random. Extremist factions within our military orchestrated it to provoke a human response. They claimed it worked perfectly, that humans abandoned their own people to protect military assets." Sarah's hands clenched. "They used it as propaganda." "Yes, to justify further aggression. But some of us knew the truth, that one human ship defied orders to save civilians. Your actions, they did not fit their narrative." Park and Rivera exchanged glances. They'd saved those civilians, only to have it twisted to serve the warmongers' agenda. "We're not the only ones questioning the official story," Sarah said. "I've been gathering data on similar attacks. There's a pattern, but I can't prove it yet." Qatar's crystalline form shimmered, their equivalent of a nod. "That is why we sought you out. We have information, evidence of coordination between elements in both our governments." Sarah's blood ran cold. "You're saying someone on our side is working with Razak extremists. Why else would your ships be ordered away from civilian targets? Why else would our attacks face so little resistance?" Qatar's voice carried the weight of certainty. "There are those who profit from war, Captain, on both sides." Before Sarah could respond, alerts blared across their sensor network. "Multiple ships dropping out of FTL," Park reported urgently. "EDF signatures. They must have tracked the ambassadors group," Rivera said, fingers flying over her console. 3 destroyers, bearing down fast. Sarah's mind raced. Their retrofitted cargo ship couldn't hope to outrun military vessels. But maybe they didn't have to. "Ambassador, can your ship still execute emergency jumps?" "Yes, but..." "Then go. Now. We'll draw them off." Qatar's faceted eyes fixed on her. "They will destroy you." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "They have to catch us first. We've got something they don't. Nothing left to lose." As the Razak refugee ships vanished into FTL, Sarah turned to her crew. Time to show them why the Stalwart's crew was the best in the fleet. Battle stations. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in evasive maneuvers. Sarah used every trick she'd learned in 2 decades of service, exploiting the Horizon's civilian profile to slip through gaps in the destroyer's firing solutions. They couldn't outrun the military ships, but they could make themselves one hell of an annoying target. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Park reported as a glancing hit rocked the ship. "Emergency containment holding." "Status of the pursuers." "They're splitting up, trying to box us in." Rivera's voice was tense. "Wait. New contacts. Small ships, coming in fast." Sarah expected more EDF vessels. Instead, sleek fighters of unknown design swept past their ship, engaging the destroyers with startling effectiveness. "We're being hailed," Rivera announced. "Unknown frequency." "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, carrying a hint of amusement. "Looks like you could use a hand, Captain Chen. The Resistance sends its regards." As their mysterious allies drove off the EDF ships, Sarah processed this new development. She'd heard rumors of a resistance movement forming in the outer colonies, but hadn't dared hope they were true. Hours later, safely hidden in an asteroid field, Sarah met with the resistance fighter who'd led the rescue. Commander Elena Santos had once been an EDF pilot herself, before witnessing something that made her question everything. "We've been watching you, Captain," Santos explained, "ever since Meridian. Not many officers would sacrifice their career to save civilians. Fewer still would keep digging afterward. And now, Santos smiled. "Now you're going to help us expose the truth. All of it. The collaboration between corrupt EDF officials and Razak extremists. The deliberate sacrifice of civilian colonies. The war they're trying to engineer." Sarah looked at her crew. Loyal, determined, still standing with her after everything. Then she thought of Qatar's evidence and all the pieces she'd gathered herself. "Where do we start?" Santos's smile turned fierce. "We start by showing humanity what real heroes look like. Not the ones who follow orders blindly, but the ones who remember what they're truly fighting for." As Sarah began planning with her new allies, she felt something she hadn't since the tribunal: hope. They'd branded her a traitor for saving lives. Now she would show them what a real betrayal of humanity looked like. The abandoned mining station hung in the shadow of a gas giant, its darkened corridors hiding secrets that could ignite a war or prevent one. Sarah Chen moved silently through the station's maintenance tunnels, her tactical display showing Rivera and Park in position at their assigned entry points. Intelligence from the Resistance had led them here to a supposedly decommissioned EDF black site. If their intel was correct, this station held proof of the conspiracy between corrupt Earth Defense Force officials and Razak extremists. Security systems bypassed. Santos' voice whispered through their secure channel. You've got 5 minutes before the loop resets. Sarah reached a sealed door marked Archives. Her hacking tool made quick work of the lock, EDF standard encryption, suggesting their intel was solid. Inside, rows of data servers hummed quietly. I'm in position, she reported, beginning data extraction. As Sarah connected her quantum decoder to the central terminal, she reflected on how much had changed in the past weeks. The resistance had opened her eyes to the scale of corruption within the EDF. It wasn't just a few officers making questionable decisions. It was a systematic effort to engineer conflict with the Razak. The terminal chimed as classified files began decrypting. Sarah's eyes widened as she read. Found something. Operation Shadowfall. It's a joint plan between Admiral Drake and the Razak Military Council. There. She trailed off, horror mounting as she processed the information. The civilian casualties weren't collateral damage. They were the point. Each attack was carefully orchestrated to inflame tensions between humans and Razak, while ensuring key military assets remained untouched. Captain, Park's urgent voice cut through her thoughts. Multiple ships just dropped out of FTL. EDF signatures. How did they find us? Rivera demanded. They didn't, Santos replied grimly. This was a trap. They knew we'd come here eventually. Sarah grabbed the partially downloaded data. Fall back to extraction points. We'll have tow. The station rocked with an explosion. Alarms blared as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. They're not trying to capture us, Sarah realized. They're going to destroy the station with us in it. Bury the evidence and the investigators in one move. Escape pods are locked down, Park reported. They've cut off all conventional exits. Sarah pulled up the station schematics they'd memorized. Then we make our own. Rivera, remember that maintenance shaft we passed? The one that leads to the exterior service hatches. Captain, those hatches open directly to space, even if we reached them. Santos, how close can you bring the ship? A pause. Close enough to catch some spacewalking fugitives, if that's what you're asking. But you'll have about 30 seconds of exposure before the radiation from the gas giant becomes lethal. Sarah was already moving. Better odds than staying here. Everyone converge on my position. They ran through the deteriorating station, dodging falling debris as more explosions rocked the structure. Sarah's mind raced, processing the fragments of information she'd managed to download. The conspiracy went deeper than they'd imagined, reaching into the highest levels of both governments. They reached the maintenance shaft just as the station's artificial gravity began to fail. Put on emergency suits, Sarah ordered, pulling her own from her pack. The suits weren't meant for prolonged exposure to space, but they didn't need to last long. The shaft led them to a small airlock near the station's outer hull. Through the reinforced viewport, Sarah could see the gas giant's swirling storms, beautiful and lethal. Santos, we're in position. Ready when you are. You'll need to time this perfectly. Sarah looked at her team. Park, Rivera, all of them willing to risk everything to expose the truth. On my mark, blow the hatch. The explosive decompression should give us the momentum we need. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning lights flashed as multiple systems began catastrophic failure. Now, the hatch exploded outward, and they were flying through space, the gas giant's radiation already making their suit sensors scream in protest. Sarah caught glimpses of the EDF destroyers in the distance, their weapons turning to target the helpless fugitives. Then the horizon swept in from behind the station's bulk, its cargo bay doors open wide. Sarah and her team slammed into the deck as artificial gravity took hold, the doors sealing just as the first destroyer opened fire. Everyone okay? Sarah asked, pulling off her helmet. Alive, Park groaned. Though I think I left my stomach back in that airlock. Captain, Santos called from the bridge. You need to see this. On the main display, The mining station was breaking apart, secondary explosions tearing it to pieces. But Sarah's attention was drawn to a different reading, a massive energy spike from the nearest destroyer. "They're powering up something big," Rivera reported. "Not like any EDF weapon I've ever seen." The energy readings peaked, and a beam of sickly green light lanced out from the destroyer, engulfing the station's remains. When it faded, there was nothing left, not even debris. "That's Razak technology," Santos said quietly. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Sarah clutched the data chip containing the partial download. "No, they're accelerating their timeline. The question is, why?" The answer came hours later, after they'd rendezvoused with Qatar's refugee group. The ambassador's normally crystalline features were clouded with concern as he reviewed their findings. "This weapon you saw, it's called a Void Lance. It was developed in secret by our military's research division, but it was supposedly destroyed during the coup." "Obviously not," Sarah said. "Instead, they gave it to their human allies." "But what's the endgame? Why reveal their hand now?" Qatar's next words chilled the room. "Because they're ready. According to my sources, both the Razak extremists and their EDF collaborators are planning something big. Something that will make war between our species inevitable." Sarah shared a look with her crew. They had some of the puzzle pieces now, but time was running out to see the whole picture. And somewhere out there, Admiral Drake and his Razak allies were preparing to set the galaxy on fire. "Then we better move fast," she said, "because we're not just fighting to clear our names anymore. We're fighting to prevent a war that could destroy both our civilizations." As the Horizon set course for their next destination, Sarah studied the partial files they'd recovered. Somewhere in this data was the key to unraveling the conspiracy. She just hoped they could find it before it was too late. The abandoned shipyards of Sarah's station stretched before them, a graveyard of derelict vessels and broken dreams. Sarah watched from the Horizon's bridge as Qatar's refugee ships took position alongside vessels from the human resistance. Former enemies united by a common threat. "Decoded the last of the data from the mining station," Rivera reported. "It's worse than we thought. Operation Shadowfall isn't just about starting a war. It's about genocide." Sarah studied the tactical display showing their combined fleet. "Explain." "The Void Lance technology. It's not just a weapon. It's a delivery system. They'd weaponized something called the Crystal Plague, a bioweapon that targets the crystalline structure of Razak physiology." Qatar's image appeared on the main screen, his normally brilliant facets dulled with concern. "The Crystal Plague was outlawed centuries ago. Its effects on my people are horrific. And now Drake has it," Sarah said grimly, "along with the means to deploy it across entire systems." Commander Santos stepped forward. "That's not all. The EDF ships equipped with Void Lances. They're being positioned near major Razak civilian populations. Once they strike, the Razak military will have no choice but to retaliate. Billions will die on both sides." Qatar added, "The extremists will have their war, and none will remember who truly started it." Sarah's hands clenched. "When?" "Soon. The data indicates Drake's forces are gathering at Proxima Station. They're planning something big, likely the first strike. Then that's where we hit them." Sarah activated the fleet-wide channel. "Listen up. Everything we fought for comes down to this. We have proof of their conspiracy, but proof means nothing if we can't stop them from executing their plan." She gestured to the tactical display. "We've identified 12 EDF destroyers equipped with Void Lances. They're gathering here, at Proxima Station. Our mission is simple. We destroy those ships before they can deploy their weapons. This won't be easy," Santos warned. "Proxima Station is one of the most heavily defended installations in EDS space." "No," Sarah agreed. "But we have something they don't expect. Razak ships fighting alongside humans. Their entire plan relies on our species being at each other's throats. We're going to show them what real unity looks like." The next hours were a blur of preparation. Sarah worked with Qatar and Santos to coordinate their forces, developing tactics that played to both species' strengths. The Razak ship's crystalline hulls could deflect EDF targeting systems, while human vessels were more maneuverable in close combat. "One problem," Park said during the final briefing. "Even if we destroy the Void Lance ships, Drake still has the bioweapon. As long as it exists, they can try again." "That's why we're not just destroying ships," Sarah replied. "While the fleet engages their forces, a small team will infiltrate the station itself. We find Drake, we find the bioweapon, we end this." "You mean to go yourself," Qatar observed. "I do. Drake will be expecting us to focus on the ships. He won't anticipate a direct assault on his position." Santos nodded. "I'll go with you. My people know Proxima's layout. We can get you to Drake's command center." The final pieces fell into place. Their fleet would launch a frontal assault, drawing attention while Sarah's team infiltrated the station through maintenance tunnels. It was a desperate plan, but they were running out of options. As the fleet prepared to jump, Sarah addressed her crew one last time. "Everything that's happened. Meridian Colony, our exile, the conspiracy we've uncovered. It's all led to this moment. They called us traitors for saving lives. Now we'll show them what we're really fighting for." The jump to Proxima was perfectly synchronized, their combined fleet dropping out of FTL in attack formation. The EDF ships were caught completely off guard by the sight of human and Razak vessels fighting as one. "All ships, engage targets," Sarah ordered. "Remember, Void Lance destroyers are primary objectives. Nothing else matters if those ships launch their payload." The battle erupted with devastating intensity. Human resistance ships darted between larger vessels, their targeting made lethal by Razak tactical data. Crystalline ships absorbed punishment that would have destroyed conventional vessels, buying time for their allies to strike. In the chaos, the Horizon slipped through the defensive screen, making for a maintenance airlock on Proxima's outer hull. Sarah checked her weapon one last time as they prepared to board. "Drake will have elite guards," Santos warned, "and he'll be expecting some kind of infiltration attempt." "Good," Sarah replied. "Let him expect it. Because this ends today, one way or another." They breached the airlock, stepping onto the station that represented everything they were fighting against. Somewhere above them, Admiral Drake was preparing to unleash genocide. But Sarah Chen had stopped him once before, at Meridian Colony. She intended to stop him one last time, or die trying. Sarah Chen moved through Proxima Station's corridors with practiced precision, Santos and her team clearing each intersection. Through the station's viewports, they could see the battle raging outside, human and Razak ships fighting as one against Drake's forces. "Command center is 2 levels up," Santos whispered. "Heavy security presence." They encountered the first squad of Drake's elite guards at a security checkpoint. The fight was brief but intense, years of combat experience evident in how smoothly Sarah's team coordinated their attack. When it was over, Sarah accessed the checkpoint's console. "Drake's diverted power to the weapon labs," she reported. "He's preparing to launch." A massive explosion rocked the station. Through the viewport, Sarah saw one of the Void Lance destroyers split apart, its reactor going critical. Their fleet was succeeding, but time was running out. They fought their way to the command level, encountering increasingly desperate resistance. Drake's guards fought with the ferocity of true believers, or men who knew failure meant death. The command center doors were sealed with military-grade encryption. As Rivera worked to bypass them, Sarah's comm crackled with Qatar's voice. "Captain, 3 Void Lance destroyers are moving to firing position. If they launch." "They won't," Sarah promised. "Almost there." The doors slid open, revealing Admiral Drake standing calmly at his command console. Elite guards aimed weapons at the intruders, but Drake waved them down. "Captain Chen," he said, as if greeting an old colleague. "I wondered when you'd arrive." "It's over, Drake. We know everything. The collaboration with Razak extremists, the engineered attacks, The bioweapon. Drake's smile was cold. Over? You still don't understand, do you? This was never about starting a war. It's about ensuring humanity's survival. By committing genocide. By eliminating a threat before it can destroy us. Drake's facade cracked, revealing fanatical conviction. The Razak are an evolutionary dead end, a species that will inevitably turn on us. Better to strike first, while we have the advantage. You're wrong, Sarah said. I've seen the truth of who they are. The only monsters here are the ones choosing to murder billions. Always the idealist, Drake sneered. That's why you were weak. Why you couldn't follow orders at Meridian Colony. I followed the only orders that mattered. Protecting innocent lives. Sarah raised her weapon. Now shut down the Void Lance destroyers. Or what? You'll shoot me. Become everything they accused you of being. If necessary. Drake's hand moved to his console. Then do it. But know that killing me changes nothing. The Void Lances are on automated launch protocols. In 30 seconds, they'll fire, and the war begins. Sarah's mind raced. Shooting Drake wouldn't stop the launch. They needed. A crystalline form shimmered into visibility beside Drake. A Razak using advanced stealth technology. But instead of attacking, it spoke in Qatar's voice. Perhaps you should check those launch protocols again, Admiral. Drake's eyes widened as his console displayed new information. While Sarah's team had drawn attention, Qatar had infiltrated the station's systems. The Void Lance destroyers were transmitting launch codes directly to the Resistance fleet. Impossible, Drake whispered. The encryption was created by Razak scientists, Qatar said, who chose to share their knowledge with their human allies. The very cooperation you thought impossible. Drake lunged for his sidearm. Sarah was faster. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him away from the console. All ships, fire, Sarah commanded. The remaining Void Lance destroyers erupted in synchronized explosions as their own weapons turned against them. On Drake's console, warning lights flashed as the bioweapon containment labs began emergency decontamination. It was over. Hours later, Sarah stood in Proxima's communications center, broadcasting the truth to every human and Razak world. The evidence was irrefutable. The conspiracy exposed. The warmongers revealed. They called us traitors, she concluded, for choosing to save lives instead of following orders. But today proved what we've always known. That true loyalty isn't about blind obedience. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it costs us everything. She looked at her unlikely allies, humans and Razak working together to prevent a war. They wanted us to be enemies. Instead, we chose to be better. We chose to see beyond our differences and recognize our common humanity, not in our physical forms, but in our capacity for compassion, courage, and hope. The aftermath brought changes no one had expected. Drake and his conspirators faced justice. The EDF underwent massive reforms. And most surprisingly, Sarah was offered reinstatement with a promotion. She turned it down. My place is out here, she told her crew aboard the Horizon. There are more colonies that need protection, more people who need to see that humans and Razak can work together. Qatar's image shimmered on the bridge display. The Resistance could use leadership like yours, Captain. There are many who would follow your example. Sarah looked at her crew, human and Razak alike, united by a common purpose. They had been called traitors for doing what was right. Now they would show the galaxy what true heroes looked like. Set course for the outer colonies, she ordered. We've got work to do. The Horizon jumped to FTL, carrying with it the hope for a better future, one where courage and compassion trumped blind obedience, and where former enemies could become the strongest of allies. They had been branded traitors for saving lives. History would remember them as the ones who saved civilization itself.